In today's video, I'll be getting into the balance changes that are coming in January. These are the biggest set of balance changes we have gotten in a long time. These work in progress balance changes have 24 cards that are potentially getting changed. And as always, be sure to leave your feedback in the comments and also on social media because they might make some changes for the finalized version. There's going to be so many changes, so let's get right into it. The first one is going to be the Archer Queen nerf. Her ability cooldown is going to be increased by 13%, going from 15 seconds to 17 seconds. Overall, I think this is a decent change. The second is going to be a Cannon Cart nerf. Its shield hit points is being reduced by 8%, going from 892 to 824, and then it's getting a bug fix because there's been a bug with its health indicator, making it seem like it has no health left, but it actually has some. The next is going to be a Fisherman nerf. His slowdown duration is being reduced by 40%, going from 2.5 seconds to 1.5 seconds. I think this is a decent change overall. The really broken Goblinstein is finally getting nerfed. The Doctor will now die to the poison spell. The Doctor hit points is being reduced by 19%, going from 885 to 721. The question is, will this be enough of a nerf? But I think it's a good nerf overall. The Ram Rider is going to be getting another nerf. Her hit points is being reduced by 4%, going from 1,767 to 1,696. I think this is an okay change overall. The Evolved Bomber nerf, which already went live in December because they accidentally implemented it early, but for those of you guys that didn't see it, one attack can't damage an enemy twice. So what that essentially means is it's not going to get double bounces anymore on top of units or towers. The Evolved Goblin Barrel is getting a nerf. The Decoy Barrel is going to look different for about 1 second after it's deployed, so there's going to be a visual indicator. I think this is a fantastic way of nerfing the Evolved Goblin Barrel so players can actually tell where the fake one is. The Evolved Ice Spirit's getting a rework. I think this overall is going to be a small nerf for it. Its Ice Blast count is being reduced by 33%. It's going from 3 to 2, so it's only going to freeze things twice, but the actual damage it deals is being increased by 48%, going from 110 to 163. The Evolved P.E.K.K.A is getting a very interesting rework. It's now going to heal different amounts based on the maximum hit points of the troop it destroys. So there's going to be 3 different values of healing. There's Small, which is 0 to 990 hit points at level 11. Medium, which is 991 to 1,989 hit points at level 11. And then Large, which is 1,990 or more hit points. So as you can see, it's going to be dependent basically of what it's actually killing. And I think this is a very smart way of nerfing or reworking the card so it's not getting the same amount of heal even if it's killing a small unit, for example. The regular Royal Recruits are getting a damage buff of 4%, going from 133 to 138, and that's essentially to compensate for the Evolved Royal Recruits nerf. They call it a rework, but I think it overall is a nerf because they're increasing the damage of the Evolved Royal Recruits as well, but they're increasing the charge distance by 33%, going from 1.5 tiles to 2 tiles, and then the charge damage is getting increased by 1%, so that's not a massive difference. I think overall this is going to be a nerf to the Evolved Royal Recruits, which I think is okay. The Evolved Skeletons are also getting a nerf. Their unit count is being reduced by 25%, so instead of there being 4 Evolved Skeletons, there's only going to be 3 now. So let's see how this goes. This is a very massive nerf. The Baby Dragon is getting a splash radius increase of 25%. So instead of it being 1.2 tiles, it's going to be 1.5. And the Witch is actually getting a very similar buff. She's getting a splash radius increase of 50%. So it's also going to be 1.5 tiles, the same as the Baby Dragon, going up from 1 tile. So a really, really big buff to the Witch, but I think this overall is deserved because she's been bad for such a long time. The Dark Prince is also getting a buff. His charge distance is being reduced by 14%, so instead of it being 4 tiles, it's going to be 3 tiles because they probably want to make it consistent with the regular Prince, which I think is a very good idea. The Electro Giant is getting an interesting buff, but definitely a buff nonetheless, so it's going to behave consistently with other win conditions and not attack buildings that are placed too far away. As you guys know, the E-Giant has a really massive sight range, and you can kite it so easily with buildings, and that isn't going to happen anymore. So the sight clip basically is going from 0 tiles to 2 tiles, so now it's going to behave the same way other win conditions do when they interact with buildings, which means it's going to be slightly harder to defend him. The Goblin Demolisher is getting a buff. The lifetime is being increased by 14%, going from 7 seconds to 8 seconds. A very small buff, but definitely going to help him nonetheless because he was for sure nerfed way too hard. The Goblin Machine is going to be getting an interesting rework. I think it overall is a buff. It's now going to be able to one-shot goblins with its melee attack. So the damage is being increased by a whopping 57%. Going from 135 all the way to 212. But the hit speed is being reduced by 25%, going from 1.1 to 0.833, and the damage per second is being increased as a result of 17% because of the damage increase. So even though the hit speed was reduced, it's overall a buff by 17%. The Mighty Miner is going to be getting a buff, which I think is okay because he is on the weaker end among other champions at the moment. The damage increase time is being reduced by 11%, going from 2.3 to 2 seconds. The Mini P.E.K.K.A is going to be getting a 5% damage buff, going from 720 to 754. I'm a pretty big fan of this overall because the Mini P.E.K.K.A has been kind of meh for a while now. The Evolved Cannon is going to be getting a buff, which I think is okay because it's proven to be one of the worst evolutions in the game, which I think a lot of people didn't expect. The barrage damage is being increased by 10%, going from 320 to 353. I think it's definitely going to be pretty decent now because there's so many bombs that it drops, and a damage increase for all of them is definitely going to change a lot of interactions. The Evolved Wall Breakers are going to be getting a buff. It doesn't affect Crown Towers. They made a note of that. So the death damage to troops and buildings is being increased by 50%. This is going to make them super solid on defense, I feel like, because you literally can use them to defend big pushes. Because instead of dealing 195 damage, they're going to be dealing 292, which is a massive increase. The Dagger Duchess is going to be getting a buff, and she's the worst tower troop in the game at the moment. They're going to be increasing the projectile speed fixes, which fixes a niche bug where the Dagger Duchess would switch targets before destroying cards with damage reduction. So Evo Knight and then Monk with abilities. So I guess it addresses a bug as well as buffs her. So the dagger stored is being increased by 13%. Instead of it being 8, it's going to be 9. And then the projectile speed gets increased by 67%, going from 600 to 1,000. So definitely watch out for the Dagger Duchess now because she's going to be a bit better. The Lumberjack is getting a rework. The rage duration is being reduced by 8%, going from 6 seconds to 5.5, but the damage is being increased by 5%, going from 242 to 255. If I had to guess, this is a very small buff for him, but I don't see him being OP after this change. That's going to be all the potential changes. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. If you guys are not subscribed already, you can use creator code BOSS to support me in any Supercell game. In my opinion, these are some of the best set of balance changes we have had in a very long time. I actually think a lot of thought process went into these, especially because of how many there are, and I think they really got a lot of the changes down. They really identified some cards that needed a buff, and they hit a lot of the ones that definitely needed a nerf. So I think these get a thumbs up for me overall, but let me know what you guys think.